In a quiet hamlet blanketed with golden autumn leaves, known as Hamlonden, stood a modest antique shop. Saturated with the scent of antiquity and coated with a layer of mystical dust, it beckoned all enthusiasts of history and the old world. One autumn evening, as the shop's door creaked open admitting the last rays of the setting sun, Daniel Wattson, a man of modest means, but with an irresistible draw to interesting and unusual items, walked in. Daniel's eyes were immediately captivated by an ancient clock situated in the corner of the room. They stood like guardians of time, imparting significance and weight to every moment. But among them was one clock in particular that stood out, framed by a heavy wooden case and bearing a strange, slightly sinister ornamentation of wings and elaborate patterns that upon closer inspection resembled a woven mass of roughly hewn yet masterfully engraved skulls and bones. The shopkeeper, a reclusive old man with faded eyes, upon noticing Daniel's interest in the clock, spoke in an even, slightly hoarse voice. "You have chosen something special, sir. These clocks are known as witches' timepieces. Not everyone dares to take them into their home." Daniel, a skeptic by nature, merely smirked and declared that no supernatural tales could frighten him. He purchased the clock and brought it to his old house that very day, where it was to take pride of place by the fireplace in the living room. After the clock was set up and had comfortably chimed in its new home, Daniel settled into an armchair with a book. Time passed, and the light in the room gradually dimmed until darkness enveloped the town. As the hands on the clock's face neared midnight, there hung in the air a sense of inevitability. With each strike of the chime, the atmosphere in the room grew tenser and tenser. As the face marked 12, something happened that Daniel could not predict or explain. With every toll of the clock, spectral figures appeared, and the room filled with whispered voices and a chill. Silhouettes silently paraded around, each seemingly permeated with the sufferings and stories of ancient times. Daniel was petrified, unable to tear his gaze away from this magical and terrifying spectacle. The whispers grew louder with each chime, as if trying to convey to him some message, a signal from another world. As the clock struck 12 times and the last toll faded, the ghostly figures began to vanish, dissolving into the air like the morning mist. The burning fireplace remaining the sole witness, for the fire would not share its secrets. Daniel was left in deep shock. He could not determine whether it was his imagination, a dream, or reality. But one thing he knew for certain: the witches' timepieces were not just a marvelous artifact from the past. They were the key to something yet to be uncovered, to be understood, and perhaps to be feared. The subsequent days passed in a haze for Daniel Wattson. He continued with his daily routines, going to work and interacting with neighbors, yet all his thoughts were tethered to the witches' timepieces. Every night, as the hands on the clock inevitably edged towards midnight, he waited and feared the repetition of those unexplainable and terrifying events. Daniel began to research the history of the clock. He returned to the antique store to inquire more from the old shopkeeper. To his disappointment, the shop was closed, and the neighboring merchants on the street said they hadn't seen the old man for days. Hints and rumors whispered at every corner. Some spoke of misfortunes and curses, while others simply joked or preferred silence. Not wasting any time, Daniel headed online, to libraries, and to the local historian. The clock turned out to be part of a local legend, dating back to the dark times of witch hunts. According to the stories, it belonged to a woman accused of witchcraft and dealings with dark forces. Before her demise, she allegedly cursed the clock, proclaiming that every owner would confront the ghosts of their past and embody their darkest fears. Evening again descended upon Hamlonden. This time, Daniel decided not to shy away from what was coming. He sat in front of the clock, waiting for midnight, equipped with a recording device to capture all events, trying to find a scientific explanation, or at least some clue. As the clock struck 12, the room once again filled with the flickering of shadows. But this time, the occurrence was much more intense and personal. The figures that emerged around him seemed familiar. They were shadows of people from his past. Childhood friends long gone from life, relatives he'd lost, and even the specter of the clock's foreboding former mistress. His name was whispered from every corner, evoking fear in his soul and simultaneously a desire to understand what they were trying to convey. After the last chime and the figure's disappearance, Daniel hurriedly checked the recording. The device had captured only the hum of the clock mechanisms and his own held breath. No unusual or supernatural sounds were captured. The phenomenon remained a mystery, and Daniel began to feel that the clock truly had the power to affect his psyche. He decided to spend the following night in a different room, the bedroom, to avoid another round of the clock's visitations. But he found no peace either day or night, his thoughts constantly consumed by the clock and the strange events. Night after night, despite Daniel's attempts to avoid the living room at midnight, the witches' timepieces continued their mystical work, conjuring increasingly potent and disturbing visions, which seemed intent on revealing something to him, something significant and incredibly personal. The midnight encounters with the unfathomable left a heavy mark on Daniel Wattson's soul, as if each curse of the witch brought him closer to some unknown brink. One day, unable to endure the constant terror, he collected his thoughts and decided to rid himself of the witch's timepieces. Weighing all pros and cons, he concluded that the best solution would be to burn them, thereby ending the nightmare. But the clock, it seemed, had a will of its own. When he tried to lift it, it was extraordinarily heavy, as if the earth itself was holding it back from its impending doom. Nevertheless, gathering all his strength, Daniel managed to carry it out to the backyard. Surrounded by the darkness of the night and the phantoms of fear, he set the clock on fire. The flames initially seemed reluctant to touch the wood, but then rapidly engulfed the structure, voraciously consuming the frame. Through the sounds of the devouring fire, Daniel heard a woman's laughter. He turned around and saw the woman from his visions, the supposed witch, the former keeper of the clock. She stood on the edge of light and shadow, looking at him with eyes that were both sad and triumphant. Her lips moved, repeating the same incantation, while the flames spread, burning not just the clock, but also the invisible chains that had held Daniel captive to fear. When the last embers died down, and Daniel turned to look at the woman one more time, she was gone. In her place, he saw only the nocturnal landscape of his yard, faintly illuminated by the dim light from his house. The air was faintly scented with smoke and antiquity, but the terror that had long held him taut had dissolved. Waking up the next morning, Daniel felt a strange sense of peace. Life in Hamlonden went on as usual. Passers-by hurried on their errands, and birds chattered joyously at dawn. The clock's remnants lay in the ashes, leaving behind only memories of what had been. But deep down, Daniel knew. He had encountered a side of reality that most people prefer to ignore. Much time has passed since then, and Daniel continued to live in the same house, but never again did he buy a clock. He avoided antique stores and anything that could remind him of those nocturnal adventures. The clocks and their afflictions remained in the past, but the lesson they taught him lasted forever. Time might be the guardian of great mysteries, but some of them are better left unsolved.